Welcome to Improve Your English Writing, video number 32. And this is part 4 in a 5-part series on the comma. And in this video, I'll be discussing items in a series, which is rule number 12, and coordinate adjectives, which is rule number 13. If you'd like to get notifications for the series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or think others will find it useful, please hit like and check out links to books and videos in the description, like a link to the companion volume, Improve Your English Writing. So, rule number 12, which says, use commas to separate a series of 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses. Use a serial comma before the final item's coordinating conjunction. So, and while the serial or Oxford comma is not required, most style guides require or highly recommend its use. Basically, there's a dispute: should you use a comma before the final item that has a coordinating conjunction? Some people say yes, some people say no. And this is called a serial comma or an Oxford comma. Well, you may say yes or no. I'm saying most style guides require or highly recommend its use. For example, remember I'm using the 5 most popular style guides, and the MLA and the APA require the serial comma, and the Chicago Manual of Style and the Greg's Reference Manual highly recommend its use. And the APA only requires a serial comma when the meaning would be unclear. So that's always the case. If it's unclear, you must use the comma. And besides that, it's not technically required in English, but as you can see, 4 out of the 5 style guides require it or highly recommend it. So you might as well just use it. And see rule 21, which is in video number 35, or will be in video number 35. In video 35, if the series contains internal commas. And see rule 26, which is in video number 37, if the series begins a sentence. So let's look at some examples. The training included John, Mary, Bob, and Barbara. So here we have actually a series of 4 items, and we separate each item in a series, and then per the serial comma, you put a comma before the coordinating conjunction with the final item. So that's this comma right here. So this is how you'd write it in basically all the style manuals, except for the APA, which is the next example. So you would put commas, and then you just would not put a comma with the last item, because you'd only in APA use the comma if it's unclear. But it's probably pretty clear that these are Bob and Barbara are separate items. Another example, here's a list of 3 things. So I went to the store and bought milk, bread, and eggs. You have 3 things here, so you separate them with commas. And per the rule, you do use a comma before the final coordinating conjunction, which is right here. Just so you know, APA would not put the comma in this case, because I don't think it's unclear that these are 3 different items. So APA would not use a comma here, but basically all the other style guides, Chicago Manual Styles, Greg's Reference Manual, highly recommend the comma, and the APA and the MLA require this comma. So here's a 3rd example. Josephine said she will not live near the ocean, by a lake, or even next to a pond. So here we actually have 3 phrases. And I'm going to say the AP, I think, would put a comma in here just for clarity. Someone could dispute me, but I'm going to say that this comma would be needed for clarity. It's not that it's totally unclear, but I think it helps separate the phrases and makes them clearer. So if you dispute me, then the APA would not put a comma right before the or here. But this is basically the rule is you have a series of 3 more items, you separate them with commas, and you put a comma before the coordinating conjunction of the final item. So that's, if you look back through all these, that's what we've done. So just a minor or some clarifications on this rule are things to think about. When all the items in a series are connected with coordinating conjunctions, that's and or nor, do not use commas to separate the items. So that means if you had the sentence of I went to the store and bought milk and bread and eggs, you would not use commas in this case. You just leave everything. Everything is connected with a coordinating conjunction. So basically, all the items in a series are connected with coordinating conjunctions, no commas. And then another nuanced thing about the using commas in an items of series or a series of items. Only use a comma after etc. or even the abbreviation or a series of items. So only use a comma after etc. or a series of items if another punctuation rule requires it. And just for clarification, since I am trying to bring out some of the nuances, among all the style guides, Chicago Manual Style says do not use a zero comma after etc. It actually considers this traditional usage. But the Greg's Reference Manual does say use a comma after etc. Basically, if you go back a number of years, like 20 years, the rule was you did use a comma after etc. But what's happened over time is people stopped using the comma after etc. to the point that where now the Chicago Manual Style says do not use it and says it's traditional usage, but the Greg's Reference Manual is still saying use the comma after etc. So if you're following Greg, you would put the comma after it. If you're following basically any of the other style manuals, you do not. So here's some examples. The instructor invited these 4 people to the employee training. Now, this regards a series of items. Do you put a comma after a series of items? Only if there is a rule that says you need to, and there's no rule that says you need to have a comma here. So that we've covered. And then my son grabbed the swimsuit, beach towel, etc. for the trip to the beach. So in this case, you did not use a comma because there's not a rule that says, we've covered like introductory phrases, things like that say you have to use a comma, but nowhere does it say you have to use a comma that we've covered in the rules, 1 through 11, that says you would need to put a comma after in this case. So here's an example of not using a comma after etc. But I do have to point out that the Greg's Reference Manual would put a comma after etc. So basically all the other style manuals, you would write it this way without a comma after etc. But the Greg's Reference Manual would put a comma after etc. Now here's a case, just this, because it is about using a comma, and it depends if we use a comma if another punctuation demands it. So here we have effectively the sentence begins with a introductory verbal phrase. Seeing John, Mary, Bob, and Barbara, if we just said seeing John, comma, the instructor greeted them, or him, I guess, warmly. If I chop off all the items in the series, we would put a comma there. So since I think it's rule 4, what is it? Oh yeah, rule 4. So go back to video 29, rule 4, about the verbal phrase. We would need a comma in this case because this is an introductory verbal phrase. So here we have the series of items, but since it ends with a verbal phrase, we need the comma. So in this case, the comma does follow the items in a series or a series of items, and therefore we need a comma. Seeing John, Mary, Bob, and Barbara, the instructor greeted them warmly. So we need a comma here not because of the series, but because it's an introductory verbal phrase. And here we actually have an introductory subordinate clause. So if you just took out this entire, if you took out part of the series, it says, when my son grabbed the swimsuit, he forgot his cell phone. If you take this out, you would have an introductory subordinate clause, and you'd need a comma there. So we need a rule based upon, once again, I think it's rule 4 of video number 29. So we put a comma after etc., not because there's a rule that says we need a comma after etc., but because the sentence based upon the introductory subordinate clause says we need one. So in this case is when my son grabbed this swimsuit, beach towel, etc., then we're ending the introductory subordinate clause, we need a comma. He forgot his cell phone. So we would need a comma. We need a comma in this case because of another rule. So going back to it, you only use a comma after etc. or the series of items if another punctuation rule requires it. So in the first two examples, there is no rule that says we need a comma after the series, and here after etc. But the next two examples, we needed a comma after this series because of rule number 4, and after this subordinate clause because of the rule. Hopefully that makes sense. The next fine point about items in a series is this doesn't really have to do with punctuation. This actually maybe should go more in the grammar section, but I decided to put it here. Is the best way to order items in a series is from short to long. But the exception to this is expected order, sequential order, and chronological order. Like, chronological or sequential order could be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That phrase or those 3 items, it's not from shortest to longest because lunch would be shortest, but because it's coming in effectively almost an expected order, but also a chronological order. So when you don't have an expected order or like a chronological order, then the best way to order the items is from short to long. So some examples is if you had the original sentence, I ate tangerines, pears, and apples, you'd want to it's best written, and actually you can actually speak it quicker or more easily when they're arranged short to long. So you arrange these from shortest to longest, and you say, I ate pears, apples, and tangerines. That actually comes out more smoothly than saying, I ate tangerines, pears, and apples. I ate pears, apples, and tangerines. It just comes out, you can speak it more easily personally. So the best way to order them is from short to long, unless there's an exception. I think my next example, the original, if you wrote, have you lived in New York, Washington, D.C., or Miami? This is best written from short to long. Have you lived in Miami, New York, or Washington, D.C.? If you're unsure, read through these a couple times and see that actually it sounds better and reads better when it goes from short to long. So that's one of those writing tips when you're actually writing items in a series, to know that you should actually order them from short to long. So now let's move on to the next rule. Rule number 13 is use a comma to separate 2 adjectives that equally modify the following noun. So these are called coordinate adjectives. Hopefully it says that on the next slide. So effectively you use commas between coordinate adjectives. And coordinate adjectives are just 2 adjectives that equally modify the noun. So here's an example. She bought a sleek, shiny car. These 2 are coordinate adjectives, so we put a comma between them. Now, if you're not too sure why this is coordinate adjectives, I'm actually going to get to that, of how you can determine if these are coordinate adjectives. Another example is he has always been a faithful, sincere friend. So once again, these 2 are coordinate adjectives. Therefore, we put a comma between them. And coordinate adjectives are just 2 adjectives that equally modify the following noun. So coordinate adjectives describe the same quality of the noun. The rhetoric and opinion, which is which is the most typical case you find coordinate adjectives that require a comma. That's why I actually made it blue. is that they're an opinion, like beautiful, fine, sleek, shiny. These are all opinions. Faithful, sincere. These are all opinions. It could be size, round, square, age, old, new. Technically, old and new can also be opinions of these two words. Color, red and blue. Origin, German, American. Material, wood or stone. So those are some of the common qualities. So coordinating adjectives just describe the same quality. So opinion, size, age, color, origin, material are the fundamental or some of the more common qualities that are being described of the noun. And coordinate adjectives can answer yes to the two following questions. Can and be inserted sensibly between the two adjectives? The second question you can answer yes to is, can the adjectives be sensibly reversed? So these are the two tests. So if you're not too sure if you have a coordinate adjective, these are the two tests that you use to find if you have coordinate adjectives. You can insert and you can reverse them. So let's try it out on our two examples. She bought a sleek, shiny car. Test 1. She bought a sleek and shiny car. Yes, we can insert and there sensibly. And she bought a shiny, sleek car. Yes, we can sensibly reverse the two. So we were able to put this to the test. We can answer yes to both. So actually, we have coordinate adjectives, therefore we use a comma. Let's try it on our second example. He has always been a faithful, sincere friend. So let's do test number 1. Stick and between them. He has always been a faithful and sincere friend. Yes, we can stick and between there. And he has always been a sincere, faithful friend. Yes, we can sensibly reverse the two. Therefore, we have coordinate adjectives, and we use a comma. And that was on the previous slide. So we use a comma between them. So that's how you test for coordinate adjective. So what happens when you don't have a coordinate adjective? Well, when you don't have a coordinate adjective or adjectives, you have cumulative adjectives. And the basic thing is that they do not describe, or coordinate adjective or cumulative adjectives do not use a comma between them. And here's the key. The adjectives they describe different qualities. That's also another way to tell if you have a cumulative or a coordinate adjective, is that if it's describing the same quality. So let's look at some examples. We saw an old black bear. Now I'm not going to go through the test of the test of coordinate, but I'm just going to say I know this to be cumulative because old is an opinion. It could also be age, right? I think I might have had that down there, but old is an opinion or age, and black regards the species or the origin. So we know just because these two are describing two different qualities that it's not coordinate and it's cumulative, therefore no comma. Another example is, we ate the German chocolate cake. Now, I'm not going to take it through the test of the coordinate adjective because I can look at these two and know that they're not describing the same quality, because German regards origin and chocolate is the material. So I know right there that they're describing two different qualities. Therefore, they can't be coordinate. They're going to be cumulative, therefore no comma. That's it for this video. If you want to get notifications for the series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, please hit like, and check out links to books and videos in the description. Thank you.